Hi, I'm David Watson, pastor at First United Methodist Church in Salina, Kansas, and my part of the 2020 seminars for the area is entitled Transitioning Out and In, and it's all about how we as pastors and churches can do the best job we possibly can to make moves into new situations as smooth and easy as possible for everyone involved. One of my favorite books is J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. I was supposed to read it in high school, as I suppose most of you were, but I didn't get around to reading it until several years later. But one of the scenes early on in that book shows Holden Caulfield, a troubled teenager, overlooking from the top of a hill a football game that's going on down below him. And he's lamenting the fact that he has to leave yet another high school that he's been kicked out of. In that scene, he says this: "Anyway, it was December and all, and it was cold, especially on top of that stupid hill. I kept standing there looking down at the game and freezing my tail off. Only I wasn't watching the game too much. What I was really hanging around for, I was trying to feel some kind of a goodbye. I mean, I've left schools and places I didn't even know I was leaving them. I hate that. I didn't care if it's a sad goodbye or a bad goodbye, but when I leave a place, I like to know I'm leaving it. If you don't, you feel even worse." You know, I think of that passage every time I move to a new church. Transitions are hard, whether you're a teenage boy or a pastor in a congregation. And we sometimes make them more difficult by not finding a goodbye on one end and a good hello on the other. What I want to talk with you about for the next few minutes is what we can do as pastors and churches to make the transition go smoothly and effectively for everyone. You know, when I learn that I'm moving from an appointment, I try to practice what I call the 3 A's of leaving a church: announcing, anticipating, and adapting. Let's start with announcing. The announcement of a move, of course, is determined by the district superintendent. She or he will instruct you as to the correct timing of that. We want to make sure that it's done in such a way that everybody involved in a particular circuit of moves is treated appropriately and fairly. Next, we move to anticipating the move. Now, this is a phase of the moving process that is filled with excitement as well as some apprehension, both for pastors and for congregations. My advice is to try and stay as grounded as you possibly can in your current situation for as long as possible. In other words, pastors, even though you're anticipating a new church, stay connected with the one you're serving now. Congregations, you know a new pastor is coming, but you still have your current pastor, and you want to make sure that you do all that you possibly can to wrap things up well and to say goodbye in an appropriate manner. Suffice it to say that you serve one church at a time and you have one pastor at a time. So stay grounded as long as you possibly can. Now on to the 3rd A of moving, which I call adapting. The bishop once referred to me as a utility infielder. Now, I took that as a compliment. I have no idea how he meant it, but I think there needs to be some utility infielder in all of us. In other words, we all must learn to adapt ourselves to new situations. We each have our own style, certainly, our own personality, our own preferred practices of ministry, but we must practice flexibility and adaptability in order to survive and to thrive in this weird and wonderful itinerant system of ours. I believe that God blesses the flexible. So stay flexible and adaptable as a congregation and as a pastor. I promise it will make you much more blessable in the end. Okay, so we've made the move. Pastors, you have unpacked your Bible. Churches, you have welcomed the pastor and family with the requisite cookies and punch reception. Now, what are the next steps? Well, something that I've practiced for many years is what I call the 3 L's of church leadership. You decide if it's helpful to you and adapt it any way that you can. The 3 L's of church leadership are loving, listening, and learning. Now, the order is important. We must start with loving. Now, I learned this from my very first youth director, who was a student at the Nazarene Seminary in Kansas City. He came to my church when I was a teenager, and I was privileged to be on the interview team. And I'll never forget what he said when he sat down with us. He said, "I don't know your teenagers, but I want you to know that I love your teenagers. Even before meeting them, I love them because that's exactly what God has called me to do." And that's what he did. He came to that congregation, he loved us from the word go, and he was able, as a result, to provide positive leadership for that youth group. He is a big reason why I'm in ministry today. So we start by loving each other, pastor as well as congregation. Think the best of each other, even before you get acquainted. Give each other the benefit of the doubt. I promise you that as you do that, you'll probably discover the best in each other as a result. Now, when you love someone, one of the best ways of showing that love is to listen to them, isn't it? Listening is the second L of church leadership. I love what Leo Buscaglia once wrote about listening. He said, "Listening is so much more than just hearing words and reacting to them. It is an expression of our fundamental humanity." He said, "I believe the very best in us is brought out when we truly listen to others, because to do so requires some of the noblest of human traits: respect, understanding, and compassion. Finally," he said, "I listen to you because I love you." You know, he's right, isn't he? We listen to each other, pastor and congregation, because we love one another. Pastors, I encourage you to listen every chance you get to your new congregation. Listen to their names and use their names. Listen to their stories. Listen to their history. Listen to their hopes, their dreams, their fears. Listen to their pain, because every congregation has its share of pain. Listen in the coffee shop. Listen in home meetings. Listen in your study. Listen on the telephone. Take time and make time to listen intently and intentionally. It will cover a multitude of sins. And finally, by loving and listening to one another, the end result, the natural result, is we learn about one another. Pastors, your congregations want to know what makes you tick, who you are. Congregations, your pastor wants to know everything there is to know about you. So tell them your stories. Give them all the information you can. And then pastors, as you listen to your congregations tell their stories and share their information, you reflect back to them what you hear them saying. Use that wonderful pastoral technique of reflecting what you've heard them say. Tell them in meetings what you've learned of them. Tell them in home settings. Tell them over the telephone. Tell them in sermons. You know, one of the things I like to do every year toward the end of January is preach what I call a State of the Church message. I do it about the same time as the president does his State of the Union. And in it, I try to tell my congregation what I've learned from them over the course of the last year. In your first year in an appointment, this is a very effective way of reflecting back to the congregation what you've learned of them as you've listened to them. Plus, it can become a wonderful springboard for moving into the future. And finally, the 3 L's of church leadership are designed to help us do just that, to lead our congregations together. I think you'll find that if you practice loving, listening, and learning well, that the L of leadership comes quite naturally. Well, I appreciate you taking time to look at this seminar. I hope you've been able to learn something as you've listened to some of my thoughts. I want to leave you with the words of Holden Caulfield from A Catcher in the Rye, something that he learned as he overlooked that football field at his old high school. All of a sudden, I thought of something that helped me know that I was getting out. I suddenly remembered this time that I and some guys were chucking a football around. They were nice guys, and we didn't want to stop. He said, if I can get a chance to remember that kind of stuff, I can get a goodbye when I need one. And as soon as I got it, I turned around and started running down the other side of the hill. God bless you, friends, as you run down one hill and up the next.